is generally assumed to be people that are senior in age, probably fought in a world war. That's general assumption, but it's very far from it.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. Welcome back to the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm Michael Sangster, your host. Let me jump right off today. I'm going to introduce my guests in a moment, and as always, we'll let them introduce themselves. But let's start by just acknowledging that it's indisputable that veterans make huge sacrifices for Canada. They have so much to give while serving and after serving. However, when they transition to civilian life, they can face challenges to find ways to continue to contribute and serve. That's where the Ontario Fire Academy comes in. On this episode, you'll hear from the leadership behind the Ontario Fire Academy, including an instructor, on how they've harnessed and retooled the skills of veterans to combat fires from coast to coast to coast and abroad. So with that, I'm going to jump right in here and let Raakesh and Michael introduce themselves. Raakesh, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Michael. My name is Raakesh Bharathi. I'm the president of the Ontario Fire Academy. Pleasure to join you all today. My background, I got my start in the military, went to the Royal Military College of Canada, commissioned as an officer in the Army. I served a short time in the 48th Highlanders as an infantry officer prior to transitioning to the private sector, pursue a career in business, which has led me to where I am today, leading the Ontario Fire Academy.
Fantastic. Michael, how about a few words from you?
Yep. Thanks, Michael. My name is Mike Lunn. I'm a career firefighter in the city of Hamilton, and I'm one of the instructors that's lucky enough to work at the Ontario Fire Academy out of Orangeville. I've been working as an instructor for approximately just shy of 12 years. I'm also ex-military. I served as a firefighter in the Royal Canadian Air Force for approximately 4 years. During my time there, I was EMR instructor for 8 Wing Trenton, along with a member of the Urban Search and Rescue team, the structural and aircraft rescue firefighting side, and a firefit team member. I transitioned from the military into policing for a period of time until I was smart enough to transfer back into firefighting. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to talking.
Oh, we're looking forward to it as well. And we can't go any further today without stopping and just thanking both of you for your service in the military, serving Canada. And then, Mike, your own service now, working with the Hamilton Fire Service, if I got the right service named. But anyway, in Hamilton, fighting fires every day. So let's jump right in with a couple of questions because we like to get at it here on the EdUp Canada podcast. What does the general public fail to recognize when it comes to being a veteran? I've often assumed till I got to know the people at Veterans Affairs that some of my military friends, that they're often assumed to be senior citizens that fought in world wars. However, Veterans Affairs considers veterans to be those who have completed basic training and honorably discharged. So it's a recognition of everyone who's chosen to wear the uniform. Assume the risk it comes that while they serve our country, which you don't know when you sign up, when you may be called up to duty somewhere around the world. So, gentlemen, what does the general public fail to recognize when it comes to being a veteran?
Well, Michael, that's exactly it, right? I mean, it's generally assumed to be people that are senior in age, probably fought in a world war. That's general assumption, but it's very far from it. Veterans are all, amongst us in many professions and walks of life. As you've pointed out, Veterans Affairs Canada has its own classification of who they consider to be veterans. Those who've completed the basic training, honorably discharged. So the size of the veteran population in Canada is actually close to probably about 500,000 people. So it's quite a big group.
Any other thoughts, Michael, on this before we keep moving?
One of the things that maybe not be recognized by the public with veterans is the amount of experience that you're coming out of the box with once you've spent the time, especially during that initial contract. You're generally going to get someone who's physically capable of performing at a higher level than the general public, along with the understanding of the importance of dress and deportment, organization, showing up on time, and the chain of command, which translates well into civil services like the fire department.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the more I talk to employers in my travels, it led us to doing some work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, because the employers I talk to are looking for the skills that come out of people who've served, people who are ready to jump right in, take actions, be decisive, jump into action. So that's what I was kind of left with. So with that in mind, give me an idea when you left the military, what was it like to find work, and even maybe personally to find your own path of where you were going to go? And Michael, maybe you just keep on going here about what was your own path like when you left the military? Because that's a big daunting moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's scary and exciting at the same time. I went into the military with the expectation of not making it into a lifelong career. The path I took out was through policing. I was interested in firefighting. Unfortunately, with the way that the contract is structured, especially with the Royal Canadian Air Force Fire Department or the firefighters in the Royal Canadian Air Force, is you're responsible for giving a 6-month release period. The hiring process with fire departments can be a little bit shorter than that. And at the time, I had some young children and was responsible financially. So I had to make sure that I was seeking gainful full-time employment in something that I was already somewhat qualified to do. And I found that with my military training, it set me up to be successful as a police officer. My path was fairly seamless. I released and moved out of Trenton back to my hometown, and I started working full-time for a police department 2 days after I had released. That's not the case for everybody that goes through the process. I was fortunate in how it all worked out, and I'm grateful for that. But this was also a while ago, where the resources that are available to military members now, as far as career transition services and things along those lines, are much more in depth than they were for me at the time. I knew there was certain things from the military that were going to be important to me. That sense of team. In my nature, I'm pushed more towards the emergency services, and I enjoy wearing a uniform. I think it's a privilege to put a flag on your sleeve, and I wanted to find a community and a job that was indicative of that.
Raakesh, any comments, any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I had similar thoughts at the time while I was thinking of transitioning out. My interest to transition out at the time, it was about 2014, 2015 timeframe. There weren't many opportunities in the Canadian Forces at the time for people. So I had been looking for a way to continue to serve. And I just identified if I could, somehow figure out a transition to private sector and be of greater service to Canada in some capacity, that would be very fulfilling. So it was actually a year-long process. And as Mike mentioned, in his line, it was about a 6-month release process. My journey and thinking took about a year. You almost have to commit to getting out without having some sort of opportunity lined up on the other side because of the long time frames it takes to release. So thankfully, just through networking and talking to mentors and advisors, I had lined up an opportunity in trade development where I figured if I can continue to contribute to, helping Canada and Canadian companies access overseas markets, create jobs, that would be in continued service of Canada. And similar to Mike, I also wanted that. It wasn't just about getting a job outside of the military. It was to be in some way continued service to Canada, even if it's not directly in the military.
You both have touched on something that maybe is a message employers can take away from today. And we'll touch upon skills again here in a second. But what I'm hearing is the flexibility with employers to help you plan well in advance gets you someone ready to go on day one. And if they can look at 6-8 months ahead, some of their requirements and some of their needs to get somebody with the skills that come out of the military, it's worth their while, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that long lead times, especially for somebody transitioning out, can be challenging for employers. But if they can harness that, as Mike mentioned, you're getting somebody that's highly skilled and highly trained that could be very beneficial to an organization.
I'm going to dive in a little personally here. There's stress on families as you're making these decisions too. And when you bounce around in the service, aren't there? And employers can help ease that stress a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the deal when you sign up for the Reg Force is that there's a chance that you may be posted outside of where you're from, right? So for Canadian Forces firefighters, that could be anywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, including at the time aboard Navy vessels sailing abroad. The challenge with that, having kids, is pretty self-evident. But again, should an employer have the opportunity to hire a military veteran, you're kind of getting a person who's already got some of the core competencies that are going to help to make them successful in a team environment. But easing that transition is definitely something where employers may have to be a bit more patient. But in the long run, I believe it generally works out in their favor, just with the good habits and skills that are already built into serving members.
You both can comment on this, but one of the things I've taken from my conversations from the Veterans Roundtable that recently happened and from different meetings with government officials is that it's the mapping of skills, translating of the skills to what you could use in the private sector, and that actually military members who are leaving the service don't understand how many skills they have that employers are actually looking for, and that more work needs to be done to help them translate what they do to go do something different. Is that a fair assessment I've picked up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's actually something I noticed with my own journey. You don't really have a good, accurate assessment of how capable you actually are in the private sector. And it's something I've also observed with other, friends and colleagues that have transitioned out. Often they find themselves underemployed significantly because they haven't articulated, the value they could potentially bring to an organization. And employers don't readily understand all the skills and talents a potential veteran could add to the team. So, they just look at military service and just say, okay, well, this member served. And it's almost just like a binary issue. They either did it or didn't. So there isn't more nuanced understanding of the skills and abilities veterans bring.
I've heard a lot of conversations about mapping the skills to what a company needs and even helping. I guess I'm hearing a lot of positive commentary about the Transition Services Group and what they're doing to help military people now as they transition out sell themselves. Is that fair, Michael? It's improving?
Oh, I would agree with that. They've obviously recognized a need not only for that transition for the members' mental health and having a purpose once they leave the military, but also helping with the ability to articulate, like the president said, their skills and what they have learned and how they translate into the civilian workplace. We spend a lot of time in the military being humble and just doing what we're told, and you do your best not always to stand out because you're just trying to be part of the team. And I think that the ability to talk about ourselves and the ability to recognize the skills that we have developed and then sell ourselves is something that is progressing, but it's something that military members can definitely get better at when they're in a position to start to seek employment after their service.
Very, very well said, Michael. And I appreciate you both opening up a little bit about your own journeys. When did you both leave the service? How old were you at the time?
I was 24. So I had joined when I was 19, 20 years old. So I spent in total about 5 years before I was fully out of the Canadian Forces. So by the time I started my release process, I was 24 years old.
I was in from approximately my late 20s until 2011. So I did about 4 years in. I transferred out about 24, 25 is when I moved to the civilian side.
Those are interesting times to be making career changes, for sure. You said you had a young family, so a lot of stress at the time on you, for sure, Michael.
A little bit, but excitement. And there was a lot of pride that went with my time in the military. So it was a bittersweet transition. It was a transition that was made for family reasons, financial reasons. And I definitely would never trade any of the time that I spent in the military for anything else. So while it was stressful, and there was a lot of logistics that went into it, I was lucky to have supportive family, supportive team, fellow veterans that were able to kind of help me out with the whole process. And I look back at it as a fond memory.
Well, let's keep going with you on the next topic, because you're different. You're unique in the fact that you are now a firefighter. You were a firefighter in the military, but now you're instructing, and you're also instructing veterans. And what is it like instructing a veteran? Is there things you need to do differently with them, or are they like any other student when they show up?
They're treated the same as every other student, but like we talked about before, they're coming with a different set of skills and responsibilities. They understand already how to wear a uniform and what it means to actually get up on time and make their bed and meet their timing. So when they're told to be in class for a certain time, they recognize that and they're there on time. They also show a lot of leadership to some of the younger students that come in that maybe don't have the life experience, where they're able to kind of give them a heads up on what's going to be expected. The program here is somewhat paramilitary. We do expect them to maintain a high level of dress and deportment. And for some of our students, they haven't never been in that position before. So to have someone come in who's a veteran, who understands those things is definitely beneficial to them. Along with us having 3 instructors that are veterans and it being a veteran-owned business, it's a privilege to be able to help support the members of the veteran community. And it to be honest, it makes our job easier as an instructor. For the most part, when we have a veteran come through or currently serving member, we don't have to worry about them very much. They're coming with generally a high level of physical fitness. They understand how to learn because the military is a continuous education process where you're on courses and you're constantly developing yourself. So they come here with the mindset and the study habits to be successful. As an instructor, we immediately have something to bond over and an understanding of what the expectations are going to be. And we can rely on them to kind of help with some of the less experienced members. I've found that if not all that have come through the program that I've instructed have all been successful in completing the program. And that's a result of the skills that they have gained in their past service.
How long is the program?
We offer 2 separate programs. One is a 12-week program where the students are in class Monday to Friday full-time. And then we also offer a part-time program that consists of 3 weeks where they're responsible for their academics. We focus more on teaching them the core competency skills to be successful with their Ontario Fire Marshal's exam.
Yeah, which they have to go on and do another exam later. So I'm going to come back to you now, Raakesh, about what can the education sector, because you're in a unique spot, veteran who now operates a career college. What can your peers, what can the sector do to support veterans in more intentional, we'll say, deliberate ways that'll make them become more successful? And maybe add a thought about the length of your programs as to how that kind of fits with what a veteran's looking for, that they're probably not looking for a 4-year program. They want to get back to work. They've got family pressures, right? As we've been talking about.
Yeah, as Mike had identified, the transition timelines and the responsibilities of supporting a family are very much on minds of serving members when they look at transitioning. So career colleges across Canada, I think we're very uniquely positioned as our programs are very succinct, engineered to get somebody employed in a certain vocational field. So we could be ideal partners to veterans looking to transition into a civilian employment. So, what we need to be doing is raising awareness. So when I was transitioning, just knowledge of the career college options were almost non-existent. You hear about universities, you hear about maybe public colleges, but those programs are often much, much longer, right? And education is probably one of the most effective way to transition into another field. You get yourself retooled, reskilled, and then you're job ready. And what better way to do that with a program that's accelerated, fast-paced, such as the Ontario Fire Academy. If you were to take our program at a public institution, for example, it'll take you a year to complete. But the same program with the Ontario Fire Academy takes 3 months or 4 months, depending on the format you choose. That's a significant advantage for anybody looking to make a change.
All you need to do is turn on the news now and you see talk about fires in the news. We had a horrible fire season last year in Canada. All indications from what I see in the news is we may be headed to another one because of the lack of snow and moisture on the ground in some communities. You talk to people out west and they're deeply concerned about it. I just have to walk around Ottawa and there's not the same amount of moisture on the ground as there normally would be this time of year. So it's clear that we need to do more. So maybe we'll jump in here a little bit and talk about what the need is for firefighters in Canada, but also let's talk about the Ontario Fire Academy. Let's talk about the team that's behind it. So Raakesh, I'm going to come to you with that. Let's talk about the team that's there and the training programs that you've got and why you think you've touched on it, but why you think it's a good fit for veterans. And talk about some of the work you're doing around the world, not just in Canada too.
So the Ontario Fire Academy, located in the town of Mono, just beside Orangeville, north of Brampton. We have a 15,000 square foot facility on a 2 to 3 acre piece of land. And we are the only institution on that facility. And we train about 300, 350 firefighters annually across our 2 formats of programming. Students come in and they go through the full process right from the beginning to doing their fire marshal examination. Our instructors are our biggest assets. They represent over 9-10 different departments across the Toronto area, lots of different experiences, seniorities, skill sets. So it's a diverse group that can offer a breadth of training to anybody that's looking to get into firefighting.
I just want to stress for our listeners, industry serving firefighters are your instructors, people who do the job every day or are just instructors now but have done the job, right? That's part of the training they get when they come to the Ontario Fire Academy.
every single instructor at the Ontario Fire Academy is a serving firefighter in a municipality. So they have real world practical experience and doing the job right now.
Yeah, as far as our staff here go, we've got just about every demographic. We have everybody all the way down from chiefs to first class and second class firefighters. We have graduates of the Ontario Fire Academy that have gained employment and have returned as instructors. So there's not only a wealth of experience, but there's also a lot of experience in instructing specifically for this organization. Like I said, we have alumni that have returned, got employment, and then returned to be instructors. And I think that speaks to the level of family that we encourage here. We're a fairly close group of instructors, and we've known each other. Some of us have known each other for more than a decade. I think that what can be taken away from that is you're not just going to get instruction from someone who's been on the job for 25 years or 30 years, but you're also going to get instruction from people who have recently gone through a recruit class, who are familiar with the current standards and expectations. As the emergency services change and the old guard retires, they've earned that retirement. Things start to progress in different ways. On top of that, the Ontario government has instituted legislation that's going to require full-time firefighters to have their certification, and that's going to be province-wide. So I would say specifically to the OFA, Ontario Fire Academy, what you're getting when you attend here is you're going to get it from all angles. You're going to get it from the bosses, from the chiefs, and then you're also going to get it from somewhat junior firefighters that are going to be able to explain what the expectations are on a new member of the team when you walk into a fire department. So I'd say that that's quite beneficial.
It's one of the things I love about our sector and why I wanted you guys to talk about it, because it is that hands-on experience from people who are doing the job. It's not theoretical. You might be doing it tomorrow, Mike, and we have no idea, right? You could be walking into a building tomorrow, right, in your day job, and you got to be prepared for that. So you're making sure they're prepared for it because they're serving. You join a fire service, you're serving, whether you're a veteran or not, right? You're going in, you put your life on the line. I'm going to stick with you, Mike. Let's go with the first week. Your very first week you show up at the Ontario Fire Academy. What's it like? I show up. I couldn't do it now. I'm 55 years old. I'm sure I couldn't get one hose up, one railing. But let's talk about what it looks like for a student coming in there the first week.
Okay, so your first week, we do provide on-campus accommodations along with off-campus accommodations. So that's all ironed out through our incredible administrative staff here, where they get the students prepared to get settled where they're going to be. They move in and then we hit the ground running. So your first Monday, there will be an explanation on what's expected as far as chores. The students are responsible for doing their own cooking here, and they're responsible for cleaning, and their beds need to be made, and everything needs to appear to be presentable to the public, the same as what you would see at a fire hall. So the first day is going to be spent talking about that, and then we're going to get right into the lesson planning. We're going to be doing PowerPoints. You're going to be getting your gear. One thing that does set Ontario Fire Academy apart from several other colleges, including full-time colleges, is students have their own gear and they have access to that gear. It's issued within the first week, and then they are free to go and use that and inspect it and become familiar with it. A lot of other colleges, you may only have your SCBA for a week or two when you're using it. Here, you're going to have it from the beginning. The other things we're going to teach you in that first week, along with your basic building blocks for the academic portion of the program, but we're going to teach you how to put the gear on. We're going to show you how everything works. You're going to breathe canned air for the first time for a lot of people. You're going to feel the weight and the heat. And then we're also going to start developing those relationships within the classes. So students will be broken down into platoons. Each platoon is going to have an instructor that is responsible for checking in on their progress and their academic and mental health and their well-being while they're on course. So getting an introduction to those instructors. And then you're in class and you have a test, I believe the Wednesday after you're starting to write your first test. So the way that the program's designed is everything's broken into chapters. Every day, I'd say 8 out of 10 days that you're here, the morning is going to start with a test from the lesson that you had the day before. You're also going to be instructed on the unwritten side of firefighting, as far as making sure that you show up on time, being clean shaven, not wearing visible jewelry just for safety issues, how to do dishes. We've had students here that they don't know how to mop a floor, which is understandable. No one's showed them. So now we have to show them how to do those things. And then understanding the kind of things that we're looking for as far as inspections, dress and deportment, cleaning stations. And then they get an overall briefing on what the expectations for the programs are, both academically and physically. And then we try to identify the students that are going to need some extra assistance. We pass that along to the liaisons that are responsible for those students, and we start to support them. And then the pace pretty much stays the same until the end of the program. We do include two burn days later on in the program where we'll go and do live fire training. And by that point, the students have spent a significant amount of time using the tools, wearing the gear. We've got them physically ready through a lot of the evolutions are physically demanding. And it's all set up that way to ensure that they're successful once we get into the more fun stuff.
It's an exhaustive program, obviously, and it sounds exhausting at times too. There must be some good snoring in those rooms at night.
I'm sure there is.
A lot of hard work. Raakesh, give me your perspective on here too. What are the things that maybe you feel you guys do differently, or that differentiates you and makes you special?
Right. Look, I think institution being run by myself with the military background does give us a significant advantage because I'm able to support my instructors better. I understand where they're coming from when they talk to me about training initiatives that strengthen discipline, because that's an environment I was trained under. So I think having leadership and management at an institution that aligns with the programming they're delivering, whether it's in healthcare or wherever, I think it's incredibly important. So for us at the Ontario Fire Academy, Mike's background, my background, we're able to better understand and make decisions quickly that can ultimately benefit students in terms of getting the best training possible, improving their work ethic. All of those things, I think, sets us apart versus another institution that students could go to.
Mike, I'm going to come back to you. You've been doing this a while. How has firefighting evolved? And how do you keep your curriculum up to date? I know you're approved by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities to offer these programs. How do you update programming and ensure that you're giving the greatest and latest to your students?
Yep. Thanks, Mike. There's one thing that I do want to go back on and touch on, that one thing that I think is very important that differentiates us, and it's in line with this conversation, is we have career support after you're done. So we have a student liaison lead who's responsible for helping students develop and be successful moving forward, something similar to the Veteran Transition Services. So that's one thing that sets apart. I went to Texas for fire, and when I was done, I graduated, they gave me my SEALs. I'm out. I never have really kept in touch with any of the instructors or any of the faculty there. What we do here is ongoing career support along with the connections that we're developing in the industry. And that's something that I think is important to note that sets us apart. As far as how the fire service has evolved, it changed from the time that I left and then got back in. So you're seeing a lot more of safety and cancer prevention being on the forefront. When I first started, it was cool to have the dirtiest gear and the burnt up helmet. You wanted to look salty, like you'd been around the block. Well, that's changed. They've identified that that's a problem. And firefighters, unfortunately, are getting sick and not getting to enjoy their retirement as a result of that. You're also definitely seeing a marked difference in the number of visible minorities and females that are coming through the program. Firefighting is an inclusive job. You need to be a representative of the community that you're serving. And I think that you're seeing a lot of fire departments move towards recruiting firefighters that are reflective of the community that they're serving. So those are the face value things that I've seen, the changes. Obviously, gear gets better, lighter, different colors, stuff gets more high speed. But as far as the curriculum, because we are providing IFSAC SEALs, which is the accrediting body, which provides Firefighter 1, 2, and the hazardous materials operations through the Ontario Fire Marshal's office, our curriculum is mandated. So that all gets done. We use the latest editions of the current textbooks that are available. And then as instructors, we spend time developing lesson plans and making sure that we are covering those core competencies for the practical side. The academic side is fairly rigid. There's mandatory material and mandatory number of hours that we have to cover for them to gain their certification. One thing that you get from experienced instructors is the material, and then how you can relate it to a past experience or a call that they've been on, or something that went poorly that they learned from, or something that they did very well. And that's one of the advantages of having full-time firefighters on staff. They can relate that current material to job-specific instances. And then as far as equipment and things go like that, as Raakesh said, when the instructors need something or there's a piece of equipment that is going to help us do our job, he's in a position where he can understand that, and we get the equipment. So we have the things that we need in good condition that we're proud of that we can provide to the students.
I wouldn't have thought of the healthcare angle as being one of those things that's changed and evolved, but it makes sense. We just have to look at New York and 9/11 and the tragedies that went on with the firefighters there that ran into the building, ran into the fire, and then cleaned up the mess for a week, 2 weeks, and got deathly ill. You just have to watch some of the stuff Jon Stewart's done on that topic to understand the importance of beefing that up. Before we get to our big finish question, we always finish with, that puts you on the spot. Raakesh, is there anything else that you want to touch on about maybe what you're trying to do with the academy and just so people understand a little bit more about where you're headed or what you're doing?
An institution like the Ontario Fire Academy, it's, there's a mission here. We're not just training students to train students. These people are going to go on to serve in our communities, protecting us. That's a very big responsibility that I take very seriously. All of our instructors take very seriously. So we make sure the programming and the support is all in place to ensure the graduate there is somebody, we can be proud of. Just to talk a bit about an example, instructor Justin Russell, who's one of our colleagues, Mike had mentioned, he's an OFA graduate, back from 2008, 2009. After he had graduated, he had spent time, fighting fires in Alberta, oil and gas, then got to spend time with us internationally teaching out in the UAE. The Ontario Fire Academy has experience doing that. And then, he returned back to Canada and joined the Brampton Fire and Emergency Services and continues to instruct with us today. Great stories, like that is ultimately what we're trying to invest in, create graduates like that who are very committed to serving and have great experiences at Canada and around the world.
It's great to hear. And I'm hoping employers are listening before we get to our last question, but I hope that some employers are listening and maybe some veterans are listening about this opportunity that they may not have known was available to them. They didn't have to be in the fire service in the military. They can come in now and join. They got the strength, the dedication, the commitment, all the things that we're looking for in our students in a program like the Ontario Fire Academy. So I hope people get a chance to hear this story out and go, I'm intrigued. That might be a path for me. That might be a way of continuing, as you said, Mike, continuing my service. So thank you for that. We'll finish hard here. We always ask the same question of everybody to give them a chance to take a moment here. So give us in a minute a mentor in your life, and it can be good or bad, but somebody, and it has nothing to do with the Fire Academy necessarily or your career or anything to do with our sector in training students. A mentor in your life who's made a difference to you. And Raakesh, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Yeah, no, I have to say, a gentleman named Peter Sutherland, he was a former Canadian ambassador. He got me my first job out of the Army. And I was very thankful to him because he was able to recognize the skills and the experiences I had to offer. And he fundamentally changed my career trajectory that allowed me to end up where I am today at a young age. So, he's very kind, patient, lots of coaching. He just recognized what I had to offer as someone who had served in the Canadian Forces. So I was very thankful to him.
I'd have to say that I've been very privileged to have several throughout my different careers, including fellow instructors that I work with. If I'm going to pick out one that I can relate specifically to this conversation, is we have an instructor here named Brian Gustos. He's a former sapper, Army engineer, combat diver, and is also a retired Royal Canadian Air Force firefighter and career firefighter in the city of Brampton. The funny story with instructor Gustos is he was my instructor at CFB Borden on my QL3 course. So he taught me, he brought me into the world of military firefighting. After I left, I maintained contact with him, and then I came to start teaching or instructing at OFA to find out that his son was one of the students that I had in my class. So his son is a graduate and now also serving as an engineer in the Royal Canadian Army. Or he may be a diver. His other son's now a paramedic. But Brian's returned to Ontario Fire Academy as an instructor. So not only did he teach me, I got to teach his son, but now he's also working here as a peer, which kind of goes to this being a close-knit group of a bunch of instructors that work well and can kind of play off of each other. So I would have to say, if I'm going to point at one that's relative to this conversation, I would say that would be a good example.
That's fantastic. Every one of the stories has been a little bit different. Everybody's had a different kind of spot. Some have had 2 or 3 they wanted to talk about quickly. But I appreciate that. And it's interesting how yours came back to the building, somebody in the building you're working with every day still. And maybe you mentored his son a bit. You don't know. And what we're finding is these podcasts go out, people go and connect dots and realize that actually there's another person I thought of, and here's somebody, and they pick up the phone and they call somebody and thank them for their service in different ways. So with that, we're going to end this week's episode of the EdUp Canada podcast. I want to thank both of you for joining us today, for sharing your vision, your thoughts for what you're doing with the Ontario Fire Academy, but also just for your service to our country and for the people that you are training and getting employed who are going to continue to serve in our communities bravely. So thank you, gentlemen, for both of you. And we look forward to joining all of you on the podcast again next Wednesday. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the EdUp Canada podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4 or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.